Well, what do you get if you're Bryan Lourd, CEO of the Creative Artists Agency, a major talent source out in Hollywood, California, and you decide to join one of your top clients, Scarlett Johansson, and sue the House of Mouse? Well, you get this from Bob Chapek.
Renegade Online.
Yeah, I think we had to know this was coming. I started to touch on this a bit in my last video. This is also from the Goldman Sachs media conference that was held yesterday, Tuesday. And later in Bob Chapek's comments after he talked about Disney Plus subscribership was going to be softer in terms of growth this fourth and final fiscal quarter of 2021 for Disney, he got into a little bit about how deals going forward were going to be reevaluated and new terms and new structures to contracts with top talent were going to change. This is much like some of the information we discussed earlier this year when Bob Chapek said pretty much outright to the Hollywood press and the business news out there that, contracts going forward for senior Disney executives were not going to be like they have been up to this point. We were going to see more flexibility, meaning more short-term contracts, 1 year, maybe 2 years, no more 3, 4, 5 multi-year contracts for some of these top executives. And again, this was to give Chapek more flexibility to make the changes he felt he needed to change as Disney's new CEO. Well, now we get these comments. So let's look at this together because there was an interesting tidbit that came after Mr. Chapek spoke to follow this up and was kind of a middle finger right there to Bryan Lourd, and you kind of had to know this was coming. So let's look at this article from The Hollywood Reporter yesterday. In light of the ongoing legal battle between Black Widow star Scarlett Johansson and Disney CEO Bob Chapek said the standards for talent deals are undergoing, quote, a reset, and future agreements will need to take into account the changes to movie release windows accelerated by the pandemic. Speaking at the Goldman Sachs Communicopia conference on Tuesday, I guess we have a cornucopia in communication play on words there. He didn't explicitly mention her lawsuit, but referred to deals cut 3 or 4 years ago and films made during that time that got launched later in the middle of the pandemic. Quote, we've got a deal that's conceived under a certain set of conditions that actually results in a movie that's being released in a completely different set of conditions. So there's a bit of reset that's going on right now, and ultimately we'll think about that as we do our future talent deals and plan for that and make sure that that is incorporated, Chapek said, quote, but right now, we've got sort of this middle position where we're trying to do the right thing by the talent, and I think that talent's trying to do the right thing by us. We're just sort of figuring out our way to bridge the gap. And the details of the article continue to go on is talking about ScarJo's lawsuit and things like that. What was interesting is that the very next speaker on the stage following Mr. Chapek was none other than Bryan Lourd's talent agency business rival, Mr. Ari Emanuel from Endeavor. Now, for those of you who don't know, you may be more familiar with the name, the talent agency, William Morris. William Morris Agency was a huge Hollywood juggernaut for many years, and about 10 years ago, they merged with Endeavor, and Ari Emanuel is still helming that organization. So Bryan Lourd's rival got up on stage and said this, right after Bob Chapek. Endeavor CEO, Disney is doing the right thing in talent deal talks with star clients. Less than 1 hour after Disney CEO Bob Chapek said that the company is undergoing a, quote, reset and trying to cut deals with talent to reflect the rapidly changing environment landscape, Endeavor CEO Ari Emanuel said that the entertainment giant, and this is Endeavor, is, quote, doing the right thing as it holds talks with clients, or Disney is doing the right thing, excuse me. Emanuel said this about Disney and about Chapek, basically praising Bob Chapek. And he was talking about the day and date release, and he's talking about, so the company, quote, has created a formula, and each one will change over time. Specifically, compensation plans may vary depending on whether the movie gets an exclusive theatrical release, a day and date, or goes subscription streaming to those platforms only. Quote, when Warner Brothers moved the 12 movies that they had to HBO Max, it is not publicized, but they paid $200 million in back ends, Emanuel said. Quote, we negotiated those deals throughout the process, and our clients made a lot of money. Now, when you say back end, so everybody understands, usually top tier talent, your producers, your directors, your main stars of a movie, especially bigger franchises, have back end deals. Think about Robert Downey Jr. as one ridiculous example out there. Robert Downey Jr. had one hell of a back end deal. Once he really became famous as Iron Man, we got to the Avengers movie, we got to Infinity War, we got to Endgame. Robert Downey Jr. made a piece of the box office grosses. So if you look at Avengers Endgame, that sucked in almost $3 billion worldwide, okay? If Robert Downey Jr. just had a 1% back-end deal, that would have nutted him an extra $30 million on top of his already very high salary of around, I think it was like $50 to $75 million. So Robert Downey Jr., guys like this make out like bandits on these contracts. So here you go right here is that you have Bryan Lourd's chief nemesis in the talent agency world that obviously had a conversation with Mr. Chapek before these two gave their speeches. Again, these sort of things don't happen as coincidence. These sort of things don't happen in isolation, especially when you're at a major conference like this with Goldman Sachs, which represents a huge swath of institutional investors for these kind of companies, particularly for Disney. So I had to laugh at this, and Bryan Lourd has got to be kicking himself in his nuts today. After seeing this, I think he had to know this was coming. I have spoken with, friends here on YouTube that are Hollywood professionals. They're in this line of work. They were both rather surprised that Bryan Lourd and CAA would have allowed Scarlett Johansson to jump into this because, again, that kind of lawsuit that ScarJo filed against Disney would not have happened. It would never have come to fruition without the talent agency, which effectively a lot of times is also the talent's legal representation, especially when it comes to the contracts that they signed with the studios to make the pictures, as CAA would have been involved in with ScarJo's contract with Disney to be Black Widow. So here you go. What does this mean? Well, the bottom line is this. If you're a CAA client at this point, you now you're at a disadvantage if you're trying to get a job with Disney, I would think. I don't know much about Hollywood itself and the inner workings, but I do understand business, and this kind of runs across the board no matter what the industry is. If you're affiliated with a business who has ticked off another business that you have to work with, you're probably screwed unless you cut and run from, in this case, CAA, and go over to Endeavor / William Morris and start getting represented by a guy like Ari Emanuel or any of his other professional agents and attorneys that he has at that firm. So look, this is a win for Disney because they have a talent agency out there that likes what they're doing and is going to be agreeable to working with them on terms they can both be amenable to. And it's a big win obviously for Endeavor and Ari Emanuel here, who now he may be in the catbird seat now, like Bryan Lourd used to be and CAA used to be with Disney. Not that Endeavor or William Morris wasn't, but certainly this is a newfound coddling relationship here that is interesting. So I thought that was a fun bit of news, and I thought it was worthy of a video. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Share your thoughts, ask some questions. Always try to respond to them as best I can. Please make sure you hit that like and subscribe button, hit that notification bell. And of course, until next time, take care.